Sarwar, and Mohammed Sarwar is Secretary and Treasurer of the Asian Council of Scientific Editors. So may I request the panel and may I request Mariam Sayab to take over the session of the panel because you have got the questions and you're more immersed with IT than an old man like me.
Thank you, Dr. Aslam. Regarding the panel discussion, we will be going for the panel discussion first on preprints and peer review, what needs to be changed in publishing and research culture. So I would like to call upon the panel experts, Dikran Trozer, Pippa Smart, and Professor Dr. Ghazi Mahabubul Alam to start the panel discussion.
Thank you very much for that introduction. It's interesting to talk about preprints because there's been a lot of discussion I can see in the chat about some of the problems that individual authors have experienced about publishing preprints and then a challenge when they try to issue an article. I wonder at this point, Dikram, I mean, you obviously as a researcher, you'll have a lot more experience than me of working with preprints. And I wonder perhaps what are your thoughts about the problems that you've encountered and any recommendations that you would give to this current group?
Sure. Thank you, Pippa. I think I agree 100% with you that preprints are here to stay. That's a fact. But I think industry in general has not taken up on them as academia has, for example. I think still industry as a whole prefers to go to the indexed, PubMed route so that the peer review step is built in. So I think that's a really big item. So if you look at the servers, a lot of the items there are basic science in biology and not the major pharmaceutical companies. I think that's a fact.
Yeah. And I think it's very interesting. There's several people have posted up here about, how do you avoid preprints? If the journal, regardless of your wishes, puts your article on a preprint server, actually, how do you deal with that? And I think that is quite a big challenge. And Dr. Ghazi, maybe do you have any thoughts about, how do you control your own article if the journal policy insists on a preprint? So, Dr. Ghazi, do you have some thoughts about that?
Thank you, Pippa. I mean, most of the journals, I don't think is going to make you force that you have to make a preprint. What they give you a choice of preprint. Now, should we be making knowledge as an anarchy, like it must need to go to all the peer review process and must need to be in a way of thinking very scientific and so forth on, or should we be making knowledge as a market commodity and everybody can judge it, the quality of the knowledge, regardless who am I? Now, the big debate is I can give a poison to a child, the child wouldn't be knowing it, whether to eat it or to avoid it. Now, then the knowledge should it be like very sensitive, like an item. Now, preprint makes it not to think as a sensitive. Now, probably blogger or preprint and all those things is not exactly what the knowledge theory is all about. Now, the bigger community is increasing around the world. The knowledge is now is very difficult to define. Now, what the question is like, how do I avoid not to going on that journals? Now, I mean, you are a writer and you have your own choice. The journal might have their own choices. And that is called, the journal is a side of the side, which is like the demand side. When you are providing an article, you are the supply side. Or when you are doing it like writing your own, so it can be changed. Now, there might be a gap between the demand side and supply side, but there are way to avoid it. One way is like you can pick up the option that I don't want to go for a preprint, or you can go for an option for the preprint. Now, preprints in a different way it is working at the moment. Now, how do you see, like before it is reviewed and then it is published, we see it as a preprint. But if it is a reviewed and published online or in an archive, we don't see them as a preprint. So preprint is something like raw articles which may need the changes, the revisions, corrections, and so forth on. Now, if you do something, make it available before it, very polished article, you might receive some good comments, questions, and criticism, or it might motivate or it might demotivate you, and it might jeopardize all of your argument and thoughts. Now, avoiding preprints, I think it's a choice of the authors, and it could be a choice of the journals. Now, both of them, they need to be in a positions to talk each other, and then they can come in a consensus. Or if somebody as an author doesn't want a preprint, he can always talk to the journals. I don't think the reputed journal is going to force you to make it as a preprint. I don't see there is as such. But if some journals is doing it as an obligatory, probably they have their own business way of tendency. There is no harm to avoid those journals. So it's a choice that you are going to make it. Do you want to make a choice of knowledge is a very sophisticated goods, and that need to go to the market after a lot of filtering, a lot of review, or you think that knowledge is a very easy thing that can go to the market without being much filtering. So choice is on your hand. So you have to pick up in between one of the choices. That's what I would say. Pippa would be reacting on that.
Yeah, and I think you're right. I think one of the changes that preprints is bringing to the research culture is a greater responsibility on the authors to get their articles right before they submit them. And I think this, I mean, I'm sure many journal editors here have experienced authors testing the waters. You know, they have an article, they send it to you for peer review, but actually they just want feedback. You know, they might want to publish in your journal, but there are many cases of authors abusing a journal's reviewing service to get feedback so that they can then take their article and publish it, you know, submit it to a higher quality journal. And I think, you know, and there are sloppy authors, you know, they don't really, you know, they think, oh, the journal will ask me for revisions, so I don't need to take great care before I submit it. But if their work is going in a preprint and it's being made public, they need to take much more care to save their reputation. And there was a very good point brought up on the chat about what happens if you write an article, it goes on a preprint server, you send it to a journal, it goes through peer review, and it's rejected because there are substantial problems. Now that article stays on the preprint server. Now, the person, as a reader, I can read that article. I don't know that it's been sent to another journal and rejected. But if that article is then taken to another journal, the author may have solved all of the problems that were brought up by the first journal, but the editor might still think it's the same article as the preprint. And again, this requires authors to be much more transparent about what changes I have made since this preprint. And authors can go in and comment. But I think there are quite a lot of changes that need to be made, and a lot of them fall to the authors, not the journals or the publishers. And it was one of the reasons I raised the question, which I see there is disagreement on the chat, which I like. So I said, is there a point of journals if we have preprints? And several people on the chat have said, no, journals will always survive. And yeah, I think they will. But I have some rather strong opinions about how I think journals will survive. And I think journals will change a great deal in the next few years because of preprints. And so I personally think preprints are here to stay. I also personally, and I can say this because I'm retiring, so I can be controversial, I think preprints are a really bad idea. And I'm sorry, I think they're a really bad idea because I think they are adding to information overload. I think they are continuing a two-tier system. And by two-tier, I mean people who cannot access the journals can find a preprint, but now they're reading and using for their research something which is not being validated. And I'm peer review is not brilliant, but I still think it at least it is another check. But I worry that people are using preprints, not realizing that they have not been peer reviewed. I still come across people that think bioRxiv is a journal, and they think what they're finding on bioRxiv has been peer reviewed. And I think there is a lot of confusion amongst researchers about what a preprint is. And this feeds into the journals. And this is my last question. And then I believe we probably, hopefully Tash will be here to talk. Do we allow our authors to cite preprints in their research articles? And I think this is another big question for journals. So, Dikran, maybe could I ask you, do you think we should allow authors to cite a preprint rather than the finished article?
You've made so many insightful comments there. I'm just biting my lip not to comment on some of them.
Please do.
So the issue, the great issue, the big issue here, as you rightly implied, is labeling items as exactly what they are. Because number one, preprints are not going to go away. That's whether we like them or not. So the fact is, if they're labeled as non-peer reviewed articles, preliminary in some way, that has to happen. That's number one. But the second item that I have to comment on is because we are in a special landscape. We're not like physics. We are in medicine, right? Because without wanting to be over dramatic, our field is literally life and death, because depending on the therapeutic area, people look at phase 2 studies and try to design treatment for patients that are really in trouble. So we need to get to the literature faster. The peer review has to happen faster. We don't have an option for some of the people that are in need. So label clearly as to what you are. If you're a preprint, that's one way of doing it. Second is perhaps we can increase the vetting process at these major preprint servers. So it's not just a spell check. So it's nearer the pre-review process. So that could be another way. Whether they should be cited, it's without any doubt that some of the items in PubMed are also not of the highest quality, right? And some of the items in the preprint servers are of the highest quality. That's a fact. So it's really difficult to flip a switch and turn one or the other off. So what we can do is just describe them as exactly what they are, and we're getting there. Even CNN, the major news organizations, to my surprise, are starting off their segments as saying, "Oh, well, here's a study. It's not peer reviewed." But, so educating the public. So I think that the existence of articles in these servers is fine, as long as the citation says preliminary, making its way towards peer review, towards PubMed.
Yeah, I agree. And also on the chat, somebody has said, why not cite it if you have enough critical thinking? And I think this does come back again to the researchers to say, do not trust what you read. Don't trust anything. And you made a brilliant point. Just because it's on PubMed doesn't mean it's any good. And I think we need to, and I think it does come back. We need to train researchers in critical thinking. And we really do. And I think that is a hole in some of our education.
And some of the senior, I keep thinking back to my PhD advisor. He used to say, it's in PubMed, but has it been confirmed by 3 or 4 other independent groups? So it's a spectrum. preprints, PubMed peer-reviewed, and also confirmed by multiple independent groups. So there's even past peer review. There's even work to do after there to confirm things.
Yeah. I can see Miriam has just appeared. Are you telling us that
Yes.
our time is up?
No, I was just about to get your permission that we have recruited all of the questions. There are about 12 questions that we received pre-time for this panel discussion. So making it a more directional. Should I just share the slides, having one question per slide, and we can quickly go over the questions that we received for this session.
Okay. We saw some of the questions before, so I think we have already answered some of them, but we'll take the others.
Right.
And also just to come back on the citation, I actually agree that you can cite preprints. In fact, I think citing grey literature is absolutely fine, so long as it is clearly labelled.
Agreed.
We can't see the slides yet, Miriam.
In just a minute, Pippa, I'm just adding the slides.
Okay, thank you. Sorry to chase you.
All right.
So here comes the first question. Once you are done, Pippa or Dikran, just give me a headline of next and I will move to the next question.
Okay, so this one I think we have answered. We've said, yes, it is fine if a preprint is cited, but it should be clearly labelled as such. Okay, next question. Right, does each publisher manage its own preprint server? No. Preprint servers are a different publishing platform in most cases. Having said that, there are always exceptions, and some journals do have effectively a preprint server. They publish submitted articles, but normally when we talk about a preprint server, we're talking about a discrete entity that is run separately from any journals. I think that's fine. So 3. Any way to join a preprint server for individual journals? I described some of the ways that bioRxiv and medRxiv are collaborating more closely with preprint servers. There are formal ways, but individual journals or small societies, you need to be using the right submission software. Normally ScholarOne or Editorial Manager. If you don't have the right software, then integration is more difficult. I would encourage you to actually have a look at bioRxiv and medRxiv sites, because they do have information for publishers and for journals on their sites. So you can actually see what they write there about integration. I don't know whether the others have any comments. No, okay. How can you ensure a content's authenticity? Read it and critically evaluate it. And I think Dikran made the perfect point about, have other people confirm that research. Preprints can increase visibility and citation. Yes, they can. Not necessarily in a good way. One of the slight issues about this is if somebody is citing a preprint that you have then accepted and published, they're not citing your publication, they're citing the preprint, and you will lose that citation. So although they might increase citations to an individual piece of research, they are effectively dividing, because you're effectively ending up with 2 articles. One is the preprint and one is the published article. And when people cite, they will cite either that or that. And so you are effectively dividing your citations, which could have an impact on the citation of the journal that's published, because you could lose citations to preprints. That's so good for authors, not necessarily so good for journals. This is an interesting one. Preprint comments influencing peer review. It did come up on the chat. You cannot run double-blind peer review if you are allowing preprints, because the reviewers can just Google the article and find the authors and find the article, which means that yes, preprint comments will potentially influence peer review. And I think that's it. So, right, if it's approved by the preprint server, does it mean it's accepted by peer reviewers? No, absolutely not. Absolutely not. Is there a chance that comments on preprints will be an alternative to traditional peer review? Of course, yes, it is. However, at the moment, there are very few comments made on peer review servers, and there are several initiatives trying to get people to peer review articles that have appeared on preprint servers, but the take up is very small because frankly, people don't want to peer review if they can avoid it. You know, I think that's the short of it. So it might change it, but I don't think so. Do we consider it the same if a citation is to a preprint? As a reader, yes and no. If you trust that the author of the article that is citing a preprint has shown good, you know, they are citing it for good reason, then yes, it could be a good support for their research. But again, we are relying on people to use their own critical abilities. How can we define the relationship of a publisher? I'm not really sure what this means here. I think some publishers they do have financial or business interests with a preprint server, like Research Square and Springer journals, but normally they operate separately. Even that Research Square preprint server has no commercial bias compared to its parent organization. They operate quite separately. Yes, is the answer to that question. I like a simple question. They basically belong to different publishers. Data reproducibility from preprints. Actually, Vikram, I couldn't. Can I hand this one to you?
Oh, absolutely. So, you know, it's a continuum. I think, you know, when you reach PubMed, you're not at the end of the process. So it is a well-known fact that 60 to 70% of basic science is unfortunately under the cloud or umbrella of potentially being not reproducible. So that is been a major pain for you know, even pharmaceutical companies that are looking for a mode of action for specific conditions and pull in this basic research. So they have to do a lot of work up front because they know a lot of what they're looking at in the literature, in the peer-reviewed literature, is not reproducible. Now, when you don't have the peer review process applied to a preprint, I would guess that percentage will increase, you know, to being a little bit higher because the limitations have not been looked at for a specific study. And the way one person talked about it to me was, you know, whenever we look at this stuff, there's a lot of black box elements. No one knows what they did, and no one knows whether the positive results can be reproduced. So unfortunately, until even in PubMed, for some items, if we don't reduce that irreproducible percentage down further, it's always going to be a question. Yeah, it's a big problem in generally in medicine. Yeah. Good
Thank
question.
you. I think we've probably reached the end of our time here. So we've answered all of our questions. There's some really, I mean, I encourage everybody look at the chat. There's some very good questions there. There's a few questions for me, but I'll put them into the chat there as well. But thank you very much. I think we can consider this session closed.
Dr. Aslam, can you please check if Tash Brown is available? We can have her presentation and then the last panel discussion.
From?
Tash Brown.
Yeah.
Yes. Good day. I'm here. Good day, everyone.
Perfect.
Tash Brown. Yes, please. Tash Brown. Thank you very much. Right. to make it with a difference of time globally. And Tess Brown is an expert and studied it and operations management. And today she is going to talk on Trend MD endeavors to develop OA publishing. Tash Brown, please.
Thank you.
It's never too late.
Excellent. All right. So good morning, everyone. It's nice to see